And now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Let's bring in a RISE analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Constance.
Hey, good morning, Charles. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I am well. And Yolanda, how are you today?
Very good, thank you. It's good to see you. You look
I
great
like
today.
The smile. Thank you. Thank you. You look good yourself.
Thank you.
Like the hairstyle.
Something different.
Yeah, I know. Wonderful to see both of you.
Likewise.
Okay, today to look at the papers with us, we have Chuks Akunna. He is the Executive Director of Authority newspaper. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day. There we have Tinubu launches 2,000 tractors to drive agricultural revolution. The tractors are to be deployed nationwide. This comes as he inaugurated a 15-kilometer road in Kwali Area Council of the FCT, saying rural connectivity is necessary to drive national growth, which is true. He spoke of modernizing agriculture, empowering farmers, stimulating rural development. The president said, and I quote, "We envision Nigeria as a global agricultural powerhouse, supplying quality produce to international markets while ensuring every citizen can access affordable, nutritious food." Great speech, wonderful initiative, especially in the light of food security challenge that we have today. But Chuks, we've seen, we've been here before. Previous governments have bought tractors and distributed them nationwide, with fanfare and PowerPoint illustration of, the grand vision of modernizing agriculture. Do you reckon this will be different?
Yes, I actually do. But then, as one who grew up on a farm, who was raised on a farm in Kwara State, I would say that the tractors came in rather late. The tractors ought to have come like a month or two before. But better late, they say, than never. And I like what the government did to have gone to Belarus to buy tractors. Because like you rightly pointed out, the bane of mechanized agriculture in Nigeria is theft and mismanagement by operators. If they had bought well-known brands in Nigeria, I can tell you that the next day, the following day, that the parts will be all over the black market, for sale. But it's a good one. Nigeria has a very low tractor density, less than 45,000 tractors, and we actually, from reports, needed at least 80,000 tractors. But a journey of 1,000 miles, they say, starts with a step. And this, in my opinion, is a step in the right direction to help, farmers this year, not just this year, the following year, the coming years, and with proper maintenance. The tractor brand, Belarus, is a very good brand, and it's, if we all remember that, we all know that Belarus is a former Soviet bloc country, so they have basic technology, they're not sophisticated equipment. And I'm sure this is going to help to contribute to our agricultural products and at the end, increase our GDP.
Yeah.
We need 80,000 tractors and we have 40,000. I think it's a very significant step in the right direction. And of course, it's commendable that the government is actually taking this step to promote mechanized agriculture. Now, there's a very major problem. We have that problem of insecurity. The farmlands have been taken over by invaders. So if that problem is not dealt with, because we're into the rainy season, which effectively is the farming season, and if the problem of insecurity is not dealt with, then all this will just amount to absolutely not much.
Yeah, I wonder, Chuks, curious, you said it's 2 months late, the tractors. Why do you say that?
No, because, as a practicing farmer, if you grew up in a farm, you know that rainy season starts in May. So, and this is the end of June. So you see that we're about 2 months late. If you drive around, you see that corn, those planted corn, which is a basic, which is a staple in Nigeria, You know, they did that about 2 months ago. That's my point. But you know, like I said, better late than never.
Okay, let's move on to the second story still in this day. Here it says Wale Edu, FG generated 6.9 trillion naira revenue in Q1 2025, plus Senate raises customs 2025 revenue target to 10 trillion naira. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy said the 40% rise in revenue is due to ongoing reforms, deployment of technology, automation across ministries, departments, and agencies, and improved fiscal governance. He also admitted that all revenue performance is below target at the moment. Great to see an improvement in revenue collection through automation and other means. 6.9 trillion naira is a huge lump sum of money. However, in the grand scheme of things, given low oil prices, more revenue is required to fund the budget. Chuks, the minister and his team hopefully will keep their eyes on the ball.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's like you said, it's a huge leap, and the minister, honorable minister, attributed that, and rightly so, to the use of technology and the ongoing reforms. You know, we are very. I'm sure you agree with me that most Nigerians love to evade taxes. We don't like to pay for services. You go to the airports, they want to drive to the airports without paying. But then, with Tinubu administration I think very well knows that times are hard, and like you rightly said, you know, with falling oil prices, global oil prices falling, you know, it behoves on government to actually tighten its belt and plug all leakages, not just in form of in areas of revenue generation, but also revenue administration. You know, we can do with less spendings, you know, on frivolities, on luxury items. You know, like I pointed out earlier, I like what the government did by procuring 2,000 tractors and farm equipment. We have to really begin to think, you know, and how to actually generate more and actually waste less.
I mean, part of that increase is also from ministries, departments, and agencies, because there had been obviously some problem with some agencies remitting money to the federal government coffer. So they're trying to find ways to make sure that that does not continue to happen. So we're seeing some results from that end. Moving on to the Guardian newspaper, NUC flawed process, false disclosure, rock courses, varsities, accreditations. In this report by The Guardian, it speaks of academic content, staffing, physical facilities, funding, library, and employers rating, all elements supposedly used to assess universities. This report punches hole at the process of the National Universities Commission. And the NUC is supposed to assess programs against established standards to ensure minimum academic benchmarks are met. They use all sorts of methods, including experienced academics, to evaluate these programs. But from this report, there are concerns about declining academic standards with inadequate oversight from the NUC. Charles, I mean, the NUC we're hearing from here is susceptible to political interference. You know, it's slow with, you know, moving with emerging trends. And so that's part of the problems that we're having in the education sector. And this report is showing us that quite a lot of things need to be done in order to move from where we are today.
And it's actually very disheartening to know that instead of having very solid structures in place, what they're doing is papering over the cracks and actually painting over the major flaws. I mean, the report says bribery, manipulation, and all forms of corruption actually being employed to ensure that courses get accredited in universities that actually do not have the capacity to run them. Now, check this out. Yes. The report says multiple sources allege that universities desperate to secure accreditation, you know, resort to hiring qualified and unqualified lecturers just for a day, temporarily assigning them offices with names on doors, borrowing equipment solely for the duration of the NUC's scheduled visits. And once the inspection team departs, they just dismantle these structures and life goes on. But they have their accreditation there and lack the capacity actually to run these courses. So there has to be a proper overhaul of the system. Otherwise, the standard of education in the country, there are different factors actually responsible for this. But this in itself makes it even all the more disheartening, because it is that body of lecturers and the university councils that are manipulating the process and then taking us on a downward trajectory instead.
And Charles, I think it's also important to talk about the impact on students with what a flawed process can do. I mean, flawed accreditation can lead to students graduating from programs that may not be recognized. And this is already very heavy. There's no jobs available, well, hardly available. And as well, the reputation of the institutions really just hangs in the balance with this. Universities will suffer, because who wants to go to a university that you're not certain of? And as well, in the same breath, I'd also like to acknowledge that very useful story by The Guardian with the use of infographics. It really gives you a nicer, deeper look at the reality of the situation.
And it's rather unfortunate that it's the students who are the ultimate victims. Those who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of upgrades in education are the ones who ultimately are the victims.
Okay.
Well said.
Yolanda, when you talked about jobs are hardly available, I was discussing with someone last weekend. We were talking about the ecosystem in Lagos and how people are creating jobs for themselves in the private sector. People that are talented, just throw away their degrees and decide to look inwards and decide, I have a talent, let me try and develop it and create a business out of it. And I kid you not, there's a lot happening. So maybe it's time that the system of education is no longer, you need to have a 4-year degree. Not everyone needs to have a 4-year degree. There's several different ways to get there.
Absolutely right,
talent
Dr.
can be enhanced by education,
right.
actually. Education enhances talent.
Well, we're talking about formal degrees and other types of education that you can undertake in order to help you to be a useful member of society. All right, let's move on to the Punch newspaper. Tinubu's Electricity Act, 7 states take charge of power regulation. With the Electricity Act of 2023, the states that now control the electricity markets are Enugu, Ondo, Ekiti, Imo, Oyo, Edo, Kogi. Then others like Lagos, Ogun, Niger, and Plateau are expected to complete transitions between June and September. The decentralization of the sector by the Electricity Act gives the states the authority to control and regulate electricity within their domains, granting them freedom to generate, transmit, and distribute power. While this is good, some stakeholders raise questions over capacity, regulatory clarity, subsidy management, etc. Chooks, let me bring you in here. It says 11 out of 36 states have started that transition, to self-regulation. In spite of the concerns being raised, I think we've been doing the same thing over the years. So it's good to do something different. So this could be a game changer if the states are serious about it.
Exactly. You see a lot of people complain, even till today, and that's why I'm happy with the story about the Punch, because several Nigerians don't actually know that electricity generation and distribution has been decentralized by virtue of the Electricity Act that President Tinubu signed into law 2 years ago. It's been 2 years now, nearly 2 years, that this act has been, this bill has been signed into law. And yet, you see how many states, very few states have taken advantage of that. And this is how to stimulate development. Without power, we're talking about how poor power generation is in Nigeria, how paltry our power generation systems are. But then, this law has been passed, and yet states that I have thought would have taken, states like Kano. When I was growing up, we had this Sharada industrial estate in Kano, where we used to have a lot of companies, manufacturing companies. I thought that states like Kano, manufacturing states like Kano, Lagos, Abia, Anambra would have taken advantage of this law and actually sought ways to increase power generation, and not just power generation, but also distribution. So it's now clear to all Nigerians that power generation is no longer an exclusive preserve of the federal government, but states too have a role to play. And in this regard, several states have been found wanting.
Anambra and Lagos are in the process of transitioning, and so are 11 states that, it says. Okay, moving on to Vanguard. Hunger, poverty now, security threats, according to the NSA, CDS, say Tinubu confronting challenge with agri reforms, social investments, as we can see from that this day story. National Security Advisor and Chief of Defense Staff have rightly noted that the hunger and poverty that we're experiencing are fueling violence, insecurity, and social disintegration in Nigeria. According to them, this constitutes national security threats. Yolanda, it's bare for us to, all of us to see. We've become poorer as a country, and there are consequences. We're seeing it on a daily basis.
Indeed, and it's a plethora of things. It's a vicious cycle of many things that are happening all at the same time. Charles, we were speaking earlier about the situation with all the killings that have been happening, especially over this past week, these past few days, even as early as this past weekend, the scores of people who have died, all to the loss of their agricultural land. And this ties in with food security, as well as our first story about the tractors, where how are we supposed to be able to make use of these vehicles properly when our lives are threatened? Farmers, it's really difficult to say. Charles, I don't know if you can jump in and help me with this, because it's really tough.
I'm actually going to say that the National Security Advisor and the CDS got it backwards. They said hunger and poverty are the catalyst fueling insecurity and violence, but I am saying that it is insecurity and violence that are fueling hunger and poverty. It's the other way around.
That's right.
Let's not get it twisted.
All right. A New Telegraph, Oluremi Tinubu seeks law back in First Lady's office. According to the First Lady, backing having a law, to back the First Lady's office will, help them to impact more lives. She spoke during the second quarterly meeting with wives of state governors and State Renewed Hope Initiative coordinators. Chooks, does this sound compelling to you?
Yes, it does. It does, particularly if you understand the role of wives in the life of a man. And we all recall King Edward VIII of the UK, of England, who had to abdicate the throne. He was not just the King of England, he was the Emperor of India, and he was head of the Commonwealth of Nations. But because the English people did not want him, they asked him to choose between Wallace Simpson, a divorcee, and the Crown of England. And he said he would rather, remain with his wife, with his heartthrob, than actually be King of England. He had to abdicate the throne. So that tells us how important it is, because in one of the most famous speeches he made, he said he found it difficult, impossible to actually to rule as king, without the support of the woman he loved. What does that tell us? It tells us that, wives and children, they play significant roles in the lives of our rulers, our leaders, whether in the Americas or in Germany, everywhere. The first family is given priority. So I think what Remi Tinubu has said is not very different from reality on ground, but what she's just asking for is for the law, to back that, because whether we like it or not, the first family enjoys several privileges. They are secured by, they are VIPs, they are the #1 VIPs in every country. They have security personnel, milling around them, 24/7, and they travel, they enjoy several perks. So I think what the president's wife has just said is, it's nothing new, they already enjoy that, but what she's just saying is, for it to be in the status book, so that no president will come to war and who doesn't like his wife and say, I want to be president without the office of the First Lady.
Okay, Daily Independent, farmers see food prices crashing over removal of roadblocks. It's something they've been asking for, extortion, harassment of transporters and farmers all over the country. And so that's paying off. And then onto Daily Sun, Play 2, Northern senators won against a reprisal attack. And then constitution amendment will correct structural imbalances in Nigeria, deepen democracy, according to Senate leader Bamidele. Onto the international headlines, we have here Citizen newspaper. You can't do business here. These words shatter the family's dream of opening their own supermarket as a tale of arguments with Pakistani spaza owners over alleged attack, and even gunshots unfolded, in one of the cities there. Now we live in fear, they say. South Africa's race and economic wars unfolding right there. And then onto the Daily Telegraph. Trump ceasefire agreed with Iran. Agreement comes after Tehran revenge strike on U.S. bases is intercepted. President hails courage of foes to end week-long war. I mean, Charles, if you want to come in here, Iran clearly not a match for the U.S. and Israel militarily, so they need, to find, or they had to find a dignified way out of this aggression against them, with a carefully planned attack on those U.S. bases. Now it seems everyone is even.
Oh, well, I think so. I mean, I remember that mantra of no victor, no vanquished of General Gowon, and it ties in here very nicely, of course. Yeah, I mean, you may have been beaten, but at least throw a symbolic punch so that you quit the fight with some form of dignity. But then the next 24 hours or so will actually decide whether or not we do have a ceasefire in place and whether Israel will also stop its bombing runs at Iran. But then the other side to it is also that Iran has been holding talks with Russia, seeking a strategic alliance with what would probably turn out to be U.S.'s major foe. So the Iranian foreign minister holding talks with Putin, so that it now becomes a case of the enemy of my enemy now becomes my friend. So that maybe when next there should be some form of conflict, then Iran would also have a very strong backer, just the same way the United States stood by Israel.
Okay, on to the Times newspaper. Millionaires to flee UK in record numbers. At least 16,500 millionaires are leaving this year as tax increases and confidence on the economy falls. The exodus is a wave of a historic incident of wealth migration, with multiple countries competing for talent. We don't have time to discuss that. Let's see Daily Star, our last story. We're all going on our glamour holidays. Travel agents reportedly see a surge in trips to colder nations as Brits fly off from the extreme UK heat for a cool down abroad. Well, that's all we can take on the paper review this morning. Chuks Akudna, Executive Director, Authority newspaper. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you so much, Dr. Constance, for helping us unpack the issues in the front pages of the dailies. And that's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Charles Eruka. It's goodbye from me.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Bye-bye.